I never imagined that a simple plastic flamingo could turn my quiet suburban life into a dramatic saga that would change everything I thought I knew about community, art, and the true meaning of freedom. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when, after a long, exhausting day at work and a perfectly routine visit to my favorite coffee shop, I returned home feeling a little weary, but oddly optimistic. As I pulled into the driveway of our picture-perfect cul-de-sac, where every lawn was a pristine canvas of neatly trimmed hedges and identical rose bushes, I felt a sudden urge to break free from the monotony. I had recently read an article about the importance of small acts of rebellion and personal expression, and though it sounded almost trivial, I decided that my little corner of the world deserved a spark of whimsy. With a few minutes to spare before the golden hour set in, I unwrapped a gift that I'd been saving for a special occasion, and placed a tasteful, bright pink flamingo right in the middle of my lawn. I chose it not because I was trying to make a statement against the relentless uniformity of our neighborhood, but simply because the vibrant hue and quirky design brought a smile to my face. I even affectionately named him Phil. Little did I know, this innocent act of self-expression would ignite a chain reaction that would upend the very fabric of our community. The moment Phil took his place by the mailbox, I felt an inexplicable thrill, a sense that I had added a dash of color to a world that was otherwise gray. The first few days were serene and even heartwarming. Neighbors, who otherwise passed by with stiff nods and perfunctory smiles, began to exchange curious glances and soft chuckles as they walked past my yard. I recall one sunny morning when Mrs. Henderson, a kindly but ever so critical widow known for her meticulously kept rose garden, paused by my fence and said, "There's something delightfully rebellious about that little bird, isn't there?" I smiled back, my heart swelling with the belief that art could bridge even the coldest divides. However, this newfound joy was short-lived. Just as I was settling into the idea of a quietly defiant haven of eccentricity, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox, its seal embossed with the official insignia of our homeowners association. I remember the moment vividly. The envelope seemed to throb with authority, its weight a physical reminder of the rules and regulations that governed our lives. The letter was a stern admonition, a formal complaint citing a violation of Article 17.3, Section B of our HOA bylaws, a section I had never even glanced at in my many, many years of suburban living. According to the letter, my charming pink flamingo was not merely an innocent ornament, but a disruptive element that endangered the aesthetic harmony of our neighborhood. At first, I laughed nervously, thinking it was a prank or some sort of elaborate mistake. After all, how could a plastic bird, no matter how flamboyantly colored, pose any real threat to the orderly beauty of our lawns? But as the days passed, the initial absurdity of the situation transformed into a palpable tension that seemed to seep into every blade of grass on my property. The very next day, I found a fine slipped under my door, a crisp $25 bill that was both a monetary penalty and a stark symbol of the strict, unyielding power wielded by the HOA. I stared at it, incredulous, as my mind raced through a flood of thoughts. Was I really going to be harassed over a piece of plastic? Was my little act of rebellion going to be punished, as if it were a crime against the community? My initial amusement was quickly replaced by a simmering anger and a stubborn resolve not to let my newly acquired friend, Phil, be taken away by bureaucratic tyranny. I began documenting everything. I took photos of Phil in all his glory, recorded the exact moment the fine was delivered, and even started a small journal detailing every interaction with my increasingly hostile neighbors and the HOA board members. It wasn't long before whispers of my defiance spread through the cul-de-sac like wildfire. I heard snippets of conversations over white picket fences, neighbors murmuring about unauthorized lawn decor and aesthetic disruptions, as if my choice of art was a personal affront to their very way of life. One particularly memorable encounter was with Mr. Reynolds, a retired schoolteacher known for his rigorous adherence to rules, who leaned over the fence with a conspiratorial tone and said, "I always thought art was supposed to be disruptive, but this is just excessive." His words, though soft, stung like a rebuke from someone who had spent his life policing the behavior of others. As the days turned into weeks, the situation escalated in a way I never anticipated. The initial fines were soon joined by a series of covert inspections and hushed meetings among the HOA board members. I began noticing a distinct change in the atmosphere of our once friendly neighborhood. Doors that were once always ajar in a gesture of neighborly welcome were now locked tight. Conversations that used to carry a warm, communal air were now laden with suspicion and resentment. I even heard rumors of an unofficial vote being held, one in which it was suggested that I be forced to remove Phil or face further financial penalties and possibly even legal action. The absurdity of the situation was matched only by its gravity. I had become a pariah in my own community, all because I dared to introduce a piece of art that broke the rigid mold of conformity. Late at night, as I sat on my porch with Phil illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights, I began to see the irony in it all. Here I was, standing up against a system that prized uniformity over individuality, fighting for the right to express myself through something as harmless as a lawn ornament. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of it. A plastic flamingo, a symbol of frivolity, had become a lightning rod for all the pent-up frustrations of a community stifled by its own self-imposed rules. Determined not to back down, I embraced my role as an unlikely champion of personal expression. I started dressing Phil up for different occasions. One day, a pair of tiny sunglasses and a miniature bow tie. The next, a festive hat for the holidays. Each outfit was a quiet act of defiance, a reminder that art in all its forms belonged in the open air, free from the tyranny of unwritten rules and outdated regulations. I began to share my journey on social media, posting daily updates, humorous photos, and even short video clips of Phil in his various guises. The response was overwhelming. Strangers from all over the country began sending messages of support, sharing their own stories of absurd HOA violations and acts of quiet rebellion. I felt a deep sense of kinship with these individuals, all of us united by the simple belief that life should be lived with a touch of humor and a whole lot of heart. But just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more surreal, the unexpected happened. One crisp autumn morning, as I was busy drafting a spirited reply to a particularly irate email from the HOA board, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a small child, no older than 8, clutching a notebook and a box of crayons. His eyes were wide and earnest, and he looked at me with a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Hi," he said shyly. "I just want to tell you that Mr. Phil is part of my school art project." I blinked in confusion, unsure of how to respond. The boy continued, "It's for Creative Yard Expression Week. My teacher said it was okay to put a flamingo on our houses, and my mom, who's on the HOA board, approved it. I'm really sorry if it caused any trouble." I felt my heart swell with a mix of relief and disbelief. Here was this sweet, innocent child, whose only intention was to celebrate creativity, inadvertently revealing that the very act I was being reprimanded for had, in fact, received an initial nod of approval from someone on the HOA. I asked him to show me his project, and he pulled out a brightly colored flyer that detailed a school initiative promoting art in public spaces, a project that the HOA had enthusiastically endorsed at the start of the season. In that moment, the absurdity of it all crystallized before my eyes. I realized that the entire ordeal was not really about the flamingo at all, but rather about the way in which our community had lost sight of what truly mattered. The same board that had levied fines and sent stern warnings was now forced to confront the fact that they had inadvertently endorsed my form of expression, only to forget about it in their relentless pursuit of control. Armed with this revelation, I decided to take a stand in the most unconventional way possible. I organized a small gathering right there in my front yard, inviting anyone who had ever felt stifled by the oppressive rigidity of community regulations. Under the gentle glow of string lights, and with Phil as our unwitting mascot, we shared stories, laughter, and even a few tears. The atmosphere was electric, a tangible reminder that art and expression could not be policed by rules written in ink and enforced by faceless bureaucrats. Neighbors who had once sneered at my little act of rebellion began to open up, confessing their own secret frustrations with the status quo. One gentleman, whose perfectly coiffed hair and crisp white shirt suggested a life of quiet conformity, leaned in, and said in a hushed tone, "I always felt like something was missing here, like we were living in a perpetual state of what not to do." Today, I'm glad to see someone finally dare to ask, what if we did something different? The words resonated deeply with everyone present. For the first time in years, our community was united not by a shared commitment to conformity, but by a mutual desire to embrace the unpredictable, the unconventional, and yes, even the absurd. The media soon caught wind of the story, and before I knew it, local news outlets were calling me for interviews. Reporters with notepads and cameras descended on our once quiet neighborhood, all eager to capture the essence of this modern-day David versus Goliath battle between the individual and the institution. I sat down with one particularly persistent journalist in my living room, the afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the room as I recounted the saga of Phil, the flamingo who had unwittingly become a symbol of resistance. "It's not about a plastic bird," I explained, my voice tinged with both passion and disbelief. "It's about the need to reclaim our right to be ourselves, to live in a community where creativity and individuality are celebrated rather than punished." The interviewer nodded, scribbling notes furiously, as if every word I uttered was a revolutionary manifesto. By that time, the fines had miraculously ceased, and the HOA board seemed to be scrambling to rewrite their policies in a way that acknowledged the inherent value of artistic expression. I soon learned that behind closed doors, many of the board members had been quietly questioning the very rules they had enforced so rigidly. One board member, in a candid remark overheard during one of the emergency meetings, admitted, "Perhaps we got carried away in our quest for order. Maybe it's time we recognize that life is meant to be lived with a little bit of chaos and a lot of color." In the weeks and months that followed, my front yard transformed into a living gallery of eclectic art. Inspired by the unexpected turn of events, several neighbors began decorating their own lawns with unique pieces, a sculpture here, a hand-painted sign there, even a carefully curated rock garden that defied the strictest of HOA guidelines. It was as if Phil's defiant presence had sparked a renaissance of creativity across our block. I remember one evening, as I was standing outside with a cup of tea, watching the gentle flicker of sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt an overwhelming sense of camaraderie and hope. The very forces that had once threatened to tear our community apart were now drawing us closer together, uniting us in our shared quest for a life that was more than just a series of rules and restrictions. Yet, even in the midst of this burgeoning artistic revolution, there were moments of bitter irony and unanticipated challenges. Not everyone was on board with the newfound spirit of expression. There were still voices, stern, uncompromising voices, that argued that our neighborhood had a duty to uphold traditional standards. I recall a heated conversation with one such neighbor, a man who prided himself on his impeccable lawn and his unwavering commitment to the HOA's vision of perfection. "You're turning our neighborhood into a circus," he declared, his tone laced with both anger and genuine concern. "Today, it's a flamingo. Tomorrow, it'll be a clown or some other outrageous display. Where do we draw the line?" I tried to explain that the line had always been drawn too rigidly, that art was meant to challenge, to provoke, and to remind us that we were all human beings with dreams and imperfections. But he wouldn't have it. His eyes narrowed in a mixture of fear and indignation. It was a reminder that change, even when it was for the better, often met with fierce resistance. One particular day stands out in my memory as a turning point, a day when everything came to a head in a way that was both unexpected and profoundly transformative. It was a chilly winter morning, the kind where frost clings to every surface, and the air is so crisp it almost bites at your skin. I had just finished setting up a new display that featured Phil alongside a collection of other whimsical ornaments I had gathered over time. As I stepped back to admire the arrangement, I noticed a group of neighbors huddled near the fence, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Before I could greet them, the HOA board itself arrived, a small, formal procession complete with stern faces and clipboards. They demanded to speak with me immediately, their voices echoing with bureaucratic authority. I invited them in, trying to maintain a calm demeanor even as my heart pounded in my chest. The meeting that followed was nothing short of surreal. One board member, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense attitude, presented a document outlining the revised community standards, a document that, to my surprise, included a clause that seemed to celebrate artistic expression in public spaces. I listened, my mind racing, as she explained that recent public feedback had led to a re-evaluation of what constituted a violation. "We've come to understand," she said slowly, "that there is a fine line between maintaining order and stifling creativity. And in your case, Mr. My last name, it appears that your little act of defiance has, inadvertently, opened our eyes to a broader perspective." The room fell silent, and I could feel the weight of history in that moment, a moment when our rigid community was forced to confront its own limitations and embrace a new, more inclusive vision of what it meant to live together. After that meeting, life in our neighborhood began to shift in ways I never expected. The old guard, the staunch defenders of tradition, gradually gave way to a more open and accepting mindset. The once ominous fines and threats of legal action evaporated, replaced by an undercurrent of excitement and possibility. I continued to document every step of the journey, not out of a desire for fame or recognition, but simply to record a transformative chapter in our community's history. Every post, every photo, every handwritten note served as a reminder that change, no matter how slow or contentious, was always possible when people dared to stand up for what they believed in. Even the most skeptical neighbors began to show small signs of acceptance. One afternoon, I saw Mr. Reynolds, the retired teacher, carefully placing a hand-painted sign in his own yard that read, "Embrace the chaos." It was a subtle yet profound admission that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than following the rules to the letter. Looking back now, I realized that the entire ordeal with Phil wasn't just about a plastic flamingo. It was about the courage to be different in a world that often demands conformity. It was about the power of art to challenge the status quo and ignite conversations that can lead to meaningful change. I learned that even the smallest act of rebellion, when done with sincerity and a sense of humor, can create ripples that extend far beyond its original scope. The experience taught me that community isn't defined by uniformity or by strict adherence to rules, but by the ability to listen to one another, to understand that every person has a story, a unique perspective, and a right to express themselves in their own way. As the seasons changed, my front yard evolved into a living testament to the spirit of creative freedom. Neighbors who had once viewed me with suspicion now stopped by with cups of coffee and genuine smiles. The once dreary street transformed into a vibrant mosaic of art and expression, a place where even the most skeptical souls found a reason to believe that life could be more than just a series of regulations. I often found myself sitting outside on warm summer evenings, watching as children played and neighbors engaged in animated conversations, their voices carrying a warmth that had been absent for too long. It was in those quiet moments that I understood the true significance of Phil's presence. The flamingo had become much more than a mere lawn ornament. He was a symbol of hope, a reminder that sometimes breaking the rules can lead to something unexpectedly beautiful. There were still moments of tension, of course. Every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of a familiar, disapproving stare from a neighbor who still clung to the old ways, or receive a formal email that reeked of bureaucratic rigidity. But those moments, instead of dampening my spirit, only strengthened my resolve. I continued to champion the cause of individuality and creative expression, not as an act of defiance, but as a declaration of life's inherent unpredictability and beauty. I began hosting small gatherings, art shows, and even community debates right there in my yard, events that brought people together, forcing us all to confront the absurdity of our differences and celebrate the common ground we shared. In time, I became something of an unlikely local celebrity, a symbol of resistance against overregulation, and a reminder that art can thrive in the most unexpected places. I was invited to speak at community meetings, local schools, and even on a few local radio shows. With every appearance, I shared the story of Phil not as a tale of conflict, but as a celebration of creativity and resilience. I urged my audience to look beyond the mundane, to see the beauty in imperfection, and to never underestimate the power of a simple act of self-expression. It was during one of these radio interviews, as I recounted the moment when the little boy had revealed the true purpose behind Phil's presence, that I felt a profound sense of clarity. The story of a plastic flamingo had transcended its humble beginnings to become a powerful metaphor for the struggle between order and chaos, conformity and creativity. And in that struggle, I realized, lay the very essence of what it means to be human. Now, as I stand in my yard on a crisp, clear evening, with Phil proudly displayed amidst a collection of equally eclectic ornaments, and the soft hum of community chatter in the background, I can't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the unexpected twists and turns that life throws our way. Gratitude for the courage to stand up for what is right. And gratitude for the neighbors, both old and new, who have joined me on this remarkable journey. I know that there will always be those who prefer the safety of the predictable, who cling to the comfort of rules and regulations. But I also know that every so often, a small act of rebellion, a dash of color in an otherwise monochrome world, can remind us all of the beauty that lies in imperfection and the joy that comes from embracing the unknown. I never imagined that a pink flamingo, a seemingly trivial piece of plastic art, would become the catalyst for such a profound transformation. In the end, it wasn't about defying an oppressive HOA or challenging outdated norms. It was about reclaiming our collective humanity. It was about understanding that sometimes the most meaningful changes come from the most unexpected places, and that the courage to be different is the spark that can ignite a revolution of the heart. So here I am, sharing my story with you, inviting you to reflect on the little acts of rebellion in your own lives. Have you ever stood up against a system that tried to dictate the way you live, the way you express yourself? Have you ever experienced that moment of clarity when you realize that true freedom lies in embracing your individuality, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it may appear? I hope that as you read these words, you feel inspired to look around, to find your own Phil, the one thing that makes your heart sing and your spirit soar, and to never let anyone tell you that you're not allowed to be yourself. Because at the end of the day, life is far too short to live by someone else's rules. It's in our moments of rebellion, in our willingness to celebrate the odd, the quirky, and the unexpected, that we find our true strength. And if a little plastic flamingo can do it for me, then I know it can do it for you too. So take a moment, look around your own little corner of the world, and ask yourself, what is it that makes you unique? What bold, unexpected act of creativity have you been too afraid to share with the world? I promise you, once you do, you'll discover a community of kindred spirits waiting to celebrate every glorious, imperfect detail of who you are. And remember, in the grand tapestry of life, sometimes the smallest thread can create the most beautiful pattern.